Welcome. I'm Matthew Phelps, co-author of the Turning to God's Word Bible study, The United Kingdom of Israel, Foreshadowing the Reign of Christ the King. Today we'll be talking about lesson 16 of our study, which covers the second book of Samuel, chapters 13 and 14. So as we left off, we've seen David committed a sin that escalated into more wrongdoing. God has agreed to spare David's life, but David's son with Bathsheba died. And then also we have seen that God has said that the sword will never depart from David's house, and even that someone will rise up against him from within his own house. So, everything's fine for now for David, but we know bad things are coming. And with that, we go to meet some more of the family. Specifically, we meet one of David's sons, Absalom, and his sister, Tamar. And we meet another one of David's sons from a different mother, Amnon. And then we additionally meet Jonadab here, who is the son of one of David's brothers. So it'd be cousin to Amnon and Absalom, and would be nephew to David. So this is our cast of characters for the next part of our adventure here. And there is a problem in the family already, and that Amnon really wants to sleep with Tamar, but she is a virgin, and so he doesn't know what to do about that. And it turns out Jonadab is good at scheming and ends up getting involved and suggesting he could help. Presumably, his position's not bad being nephew of the king, but it's not nearly as good as being advisor to the future king. So it's extremely unlikely that his desire to help is entirely altruistic, especially when you consider what his plan is. Which the plan he suggests is, Amnon, you should just pretend to be sick and say that really you need Tamar to come and help you get better by making food for you and giving it to you. And then you can figure out what to do from there, probably. And so that is the plan that has been launched. And the people who are going to be involved initially here in this next stage of our journey. Amnon has a plan that he then begins to carry out. He pretends to be sick. Any plan that starts with lying to everybody you know is going to be a morally upright and beneficial and good plan. So he starts by pretending to be sick. David comes to visit him and he says, I really need my sister Tamar to help me out here. And so David tells her she should. It's pretty clear she wouldn't have bothered without David's intervention, but here we are. And so she goes, and then he makes an excuse to get everyone else out of the room and to get her into his chamber, at which point she starts to get a hint of what's going on and says, brother, half-brother, but brother, you could just ask Dad, and I'm sure that he would let you marry me. And we could, do this right. And he says, I'm not interested in marrying you. That's not what we're doing here. And then he proceeds to force himself on her. And then as soon as he's done, all of the lust and desire and wanting he had for her turns into hate, and he doesn't like her or want to see her at all. Which, again, consequences of sin. But so he sends her away. And she, again, is pleading, it was bad enough what you did, but it's even worse now if you send me away. It'll be so very shameful for me. And he says, I don't care. Servants, get her out of here. And so we are now in a situation where Amnon has raped Tamar. Amnon hears about this, and he's about the rape of his sister. And he's obviously, by his brother, and he's obviously none too pleased. And so initially he says, sister, don't worry about it, which is probably not super comforting. And David finds out, and he gets very angry, but doesn't seem to do much about it. And so the situation sits for a while. And we see that Absalom is really not interacting terribly much with Amnon, but he's not doing anything to let on how pissed he is, which he is. And he's biding his time. So then a couple years later, he's going to go shear some sheep, and there's going to be a party associated with that. And Absalom has a plan of his own, which is to go and say, "Hey, Dad, you want to come down to the sheep shearing party?" And David, of course, says, "I am much too busy being king to do that, and I pass." And he says, "Oh, okay, well, I really wanted you to come, but if you can't, could Amnon come? That would be fun." And so over time, he keeps pestering, and David relents and says, "Yeah, sure, okay. As long as I don't have to go, Amnon can go. Whatever. Yeah, that works." So Amnon and all the rest of Absalom's brothers go down. He throws a big party, makes sure that there is lots of wine. Amnon drinks his fill and then some, and then Absalom has him murdered, which he's been plotting for quite some time. And it's really pretty hard to blame him, even though obviously eye for an eye is not the way to go about these things. You can kind of see his point of view when nobody else seemed to be wanting to do anything. And so it is. All the other brothers run away because they're afraid that Absalom, rather than just trying to avenge his sister's rape, might be trying to murder all of them and gain position as the undisputed heir to the throne, which is not what he's after, but everybody seems to think it could be, and they're not really wanting to stick around and find out. So Absalom has just killed Amnon. Now word starts to spread, but chaotically. And a message, because everyone departed in such chaos and it's not so clear what's happening, the first word of the event that gets back to David is Absalom has killed all of your sons. And there is this panic that Absalom is making a grab for the throne. But in the presence of David, Jonadab is there and says, "Oh, I know what's going on. David, don't worry about it. It's not that." Remember, he's the one who actually advised Amnon to carry out the plan that led to the rape, that now led to the murder. So he's pretty intimately familiar with the whole situation, and he is able to rightly judge the motives that are going on here. It's also not 100% impossible that he could have even helped Absalom come up with this plan, although there's no mention that happened, and Absalom definitely seems like a do-it-yourself kind of guy. So probably not, but at any rate, he is very familiar with what's going on here, and it ends up that he's right. And so David initially, huge reaction, rends his garments, mourns for all of his sons, but finds out that nope, it was just the one. Absalom has killed Amnon, all the other sons left in chaos. Jonadab has told the king, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." Absalom, not willing to trust to his dad giving him the same bye that he gave Amnon when Amnon raped his sister, decides the best thing to do would be to hightail it out of town, which he does. And then the other sons come back, find David. David's very relieved, and so now we're where we are, -1 Amnon, and with Absalom in exile. And there's here in verse 39, there's an odd statement about the point of view of David. He was comforted about Amnon, seeing he was dead, and he longs to see Absalom again. It seems like David has also not been thrilled this whole time about what happened with Amnon, and just not willing to take action. And he's been kind of He was greatly angry, we know. He didn't do anything. It reads like he has been upset about this the whole time, that he has been not doing anything and letting Absalom fester. And now what he actually wants is for his son Absalom to come home, but he is not doing anything about it. Once again, David is not acting. For someone who is so good in battle, in his personal family life, he seems to be a big fan of not doing anything, which will create problems. So as we left off, Absalom is fled, Amnon is dead, David is not doing anything. Joab, however, is not the type to not do anything. And he sees that David is troubled over his son Absalom being in self-imposed exile and decides to see if he can't solve that problem. And so he finds a wise woman, Tekoa, and launches a plan that he thinks will help David see what he's doing from a different perspective and possibly help him stir towards some sort of action. So Joab has launched a plan, and now we see the woman from Tekoa going to speak with David about what we can presume is an imagined issue or a made-up issue. Per Joab, she's been told to tell David everything that Joab told her to say, and so she has a problem for the king to help her solve, which is her husband has been dead and she has 2 sons, and they ended up quarreling in the field. One of them died and the other one killed him, and so now the rest of the family wants to kill the remaining son. So the way this works for Jews, if the remaining son is the only one who can carry on at this point the line of his father, so that if you actually kill him along with the dead husband and the dead brother, then you kill the whole line. And her point is, you're doing too much damage here. This is not how to solve this problem. This makes it worse. What are you doing? It's stupid. And so her plea to David is exactly that, is this is too much. This can't be the right answer in this circumstance. Please don't let them kill my son. That can't be what's best. And David, hearing the story, says, oh no, I get it. Yeah, you're right. That would be too much. I'll intervene. I'll command my people what to do. Your son will be safe. We'll make sure nobody harms him, and I'll help you out. But of course, we as the audience know that this story is intended to be about not that, but something else. As Nathan kind of shocked David into a new perspective with a parable when he talked to him about the adultery and murder, now we see Joab trying a similar approach. It seems like this is the best way that people close to David have found to get his attention when he's being a little stubborn. So I guess we'll see how this one works. So as a part of Joab's plan, we've just seen a woman from Tekoa lay out her fake problem of her dead husband, 1 dead son and 1 left, that David has agreed, even though he killed the other son, shouldn't be killed, and has promised to help her out with that. And now she moves on to the next stage of Joab's plan, which is to say, not unlike what Nathan said in another version of telling David a story first, this is actually about you, David, and your sons, and what you're depriving yourself and Israel of if you kill Absalom because he killed Amnon, and you shouldn't do that. And of course, if you think about it, you know that because you are wise like an angel, able to tell the difference between what's good and evil. So of course you know best, but it looks like you're doing the wrong thing here. Joab's plan has come to fruition here. The woman from Tekoa has laid out first the contrived story and then has called David on it. And David's response is, did Joab put you up to this? To which the woman does not lie and says, yes, he did. He did. He's worried about your relationship with Absalom, basically is the implication. And, before when I was sucking up and said, you're like an angel of God, knowing, being wise and knowing good from bad, now I actually mean that, and I'm kind of scared because you understood immediately that this was Joab and not me who was doing this. And so David addresses the rest of his reply correctly to Joab and says, you have a point, and you care. And Joab says, yeah, if I found favor with you at all, you should fix this thing. And yeah, sure, go get him, bring him back. You're right. Absalom should come back, and I won't kill him, promise. You can just bring him back. And then Joab says, now I know you really like me and respect me because you're willing to do this thing. Thanks, King. And he goes and gets Absalom. who comes back to live in Jerusalem. And then, by way of, because heaven forbid we not mention this about a king or a royal heir, we mention he is super good looking. So, gotta make sure we take a couple verses, 2-3 verses, to describe how good looking he is, how much his hair weighs when he cuts it. The important things, That's Absalom for now. So Absalom's been living in Jerusalem after being brought back and not killed, but he has an issue where he's not allowed to see his dad, and the guy who helped him get back, Joab, is not taking his messages. And so he feels really cut off, and at that point he decides he needs to try to get somebody's attention. And he happens to be living nearby Joab, so he decides to set Joab's fields on fire. Figures that'll bring him around, which does. Turns out destroying a lot of his property is a good way to get Joab's attention. And he comes and Absalom says, what gives? I tried to call you. If you just responded to one of my messages, we wouldn't be here, but you told me to come back. This is worse than it was when I was in exile. I need to talk to Dad. And so Joab carries the message and says, your son turns out really wants to talk to you and is fairly insistent about it. Couldn't you just see him? And so they do, and they seem to, at least an initial reunion, seem to be getting along okay. But obviously Absalom has a lot to be not super thrilled about in this scenario right now. And we've seen that he can hold in his frustration for a long time as he builds a plan and figures out how he's going to get his back. But for now, seems like everything's going great. Maybe it is. This has been an overview of Lesson 16 of the Turning to God's Word Bible Study, The United Kingdom of Israel, Foreshadowing the Reign of Christ the King. For more information, consult our written study and visit us online at turningtogodsword.com.